Good afternoon and welcome to the Miles Nadal JCC. My name is Lisa Roy. I'm the manager of Adult Daytime Culture and Education at the Miles Nadal Jewish Community Center, which is located in downtown Toronto. It is wonderful seeing so many familiar faces in our building. A special welcome if you're joining us for the first time, and a warm hello to our at-home virtual audience. It is my pleasure to be hosting this afternoon's Meet the Author event featuring Heather Camlot. Today's program is co-presented by the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards and is presented in partnership with the Israel and Golda Koschitzky Center for Jewish Studies at York University. We are very grateful to Toronto Public Library for presenting this program as part of its inaugural Jewish Heritage Series and for making this program free of charge for everyone to enjoy. A reminder, if you're in the room with us, kindly turn your cell phones to vibrate or to off. And if you have a question for Heather, either here or in our Zoom room, kindly hold those until the end, and we will have a question and answer period at the end of her presentation. There is also going to be, at the end, for people in the room, book purchasing and signing. Please join me for a well-deserved round of applause for my JCC colleagues who are hard at work behind the scenes, making sure that this multi-access event runs smoothly. Shay Santati, who is in the room with us. Our dedicated volunteers, lay leader Denise Drabkin, who is hosting our Zoom room. And Barb Mlotek and Phyllis Panet, who is still hard at work downstairs at registration. So now it gives me great pleasure to invite Edward Trapinski, the chair of the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards, to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thanks.
Can you hear me? Yes. The Canadian Jewish Literary Awards is really proud to partner with the Miles Nadal JCC to present its award-winning authors, and especially today in association with the Toronto Public Library. I'm delighted to introduce, and I want to invite her up, award-winning author, Rona, please come up, Rona. Rona Rado, who's a member of the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards jury, and she's the lead reader in the children, young adult category. And together we're going to introduce Heather Camlot, the author of The Prisoner and the Writer. But Rona discovered The Prisoner of the Writer, and she was the first champion at the jury meetings. And the way we operate is we have about 8 categories every year, and we have readers who are specialized in certain areas, and Rona's our lead reader with children and young adult. The Canadian Jewish Literary Awards celebrates, acknowledges, and rewards the finest Canadian writing on subjects with Jewish themes every year. And The Prisoner and the Writer, about the Dreyfus Affair, France's turn of the century political scandal, is particularly relevant today, and it's a fine representation of the creative achievements that reflect the Jewish themes and ideas. It deals with the ideas of anti-Semitism and media bias and all the things that we're thinking about in our world today. Culture is a major measure of the vibrancy of Jewish life in Canada, and recognizing the best Jewish books of the year allows us to better understand ourselves, our collective past, our shared present, and the uncertain world of our future. The 2024 Canadian Jewish Literary Awards call for submissions is open until May 31st. If you have a book that you think might be eligible, visit our website at cjlaawards.ca and submit. And if you have friends and colleagues who've written books in the past year, let them know that we're interested in looking at what they're doing. And I'm inviting you to the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards Gala for the presentation of the awards on October 27th. Put it in your calendar, right here at the Al Green Theater. It's free and open for everybody, and save the date. So I want to introduce you to Rona Arato, and she's going to introduce Heather.
Okay, thank you very much, Edward. And I just want to say that being on the jury is an honor, and it's given me a chance to read some amazing books. And when we go to vote on the winners, these are difficult decisions because there really are wonderful writers here in Canada writing on Jewish themes. When I first read The Prisoner and the Writer, I just was blown away because it's such a unique, I mean, the story is known, or at least to our generation, but I'm so happy that Heather is introducing it to younger people who don't know some of this history. And the way the book is written and illustrated in verse, it's just wonderful. So when a Jewish army captain is falsely accused of treason and sent to prison, a writer, Emile Zola, uses his pen to fight for justice. And in 1805, the book opens with the prisoner watching the ocean through the bars of his cell. He's on an island, thousands of miles away from his wife, his children, his country, his home, everything that he knows dear. But what if he's innocent? Why was he sent there? 7,000 miles away, the famous writer Emile Zola wonders, is Alfred a traitor to France or the victim of anti-Semitism? And convinced that Alfred is innocent, Emile knows that it is his duty to help. And this is a writer with a conscience, which today, as Edward has said, we could use a lot more of. He pens the famous letter, J'accuse, explaining that Alfred was blamed, charged, and tried, convicted for one reason only, because he is Jewish, not because he is guilty of treason. So this is a powerful middle grade story written in verse with full page illustrations about a writer with the courage to change the world. The true story of the Dreyfus Affair, The Prisoner and the Writer, was published in time for the 125th anniversary of J'accuse, and it acts as a reminder that a person committed to truth, justice, and equality must stand up and speak out against prejudice for themselves and for others. And this is a message that needs to be broadcast, as we all know, loud and clear today. Unfortunately, it is not taking hold as much as we would like it to. And books like this are so important to bring the history to current audiences, to remind them of what has happened, what is happening, and what can happen. So Heather, thank you for writing this beautiful book, and I would like you to come up and talk about it.
Okay, so thank you so much, Edward and Rona. And now it gives me very great pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Heather Camlot is an award-winning children's author, journalist, editor, and translator. Heather has written hundreds of articles about entertainment, children's literature, health, travel, home decor, and parenting for such publications as Quill and Choir, The Globe and Mail, Canadian Living, and the New York Times. Heather has written 6 nonfiction books and 2 novels for middle grade readers. Clutch and The Other Side each received Skipping Stones Honor Awards and nominations for Forest of Reading. Clutch was also named a 2017 Best Book from Kirkus Reviews and a finalist for the Jeffrey Bilson Award for Historical Fiction for Young People. Heather is also a longtime volunteer with the Canadian Society of Children's Authors, Illustrators, and Performers, and I am delighted to welcome her to our community center today. So please join me in a very warm JCC welcome for Heather Camlot.
Thank you so much. I was fine sitting there for a little while. Now I'm getting nervous to speak to people in person. So I apologize. I apologize in advance for the rockiness of my voice at the beginning. So yes, thank you to the JCC. Thank you to the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards. Thank you to Rona. Thank you to Edward. Thank you to Lisa. Thank you, Shay. Thank you, everybody who has helped put this together. It's like a long list. That's why they don't put the credits at the beginning of movies anymore. They're all at the end because it takes too long, but it's amazing. So thank you all for bringing me here today. We're going to talk about The Prisoner and the Writer. And I just wanted to show you, give or take, the books. The screen is over there. Give or take the books that I've written so far. So the first two are the novels that have been mentioned, Clutch and The Other Side. And the rest of the books are nonfiction. And most of them have to do with a little bit of social justice in them. I don't really know where that came from. I wasn't really a social justice kind of kid, but as I got older, I guess I just came to that in my life, with the exception of Becoming Bionic, which is completely STEM, completely science. I don't know where that came from either. So today we're going to talk about The Prisoner and the Writer. It's been translated into French, Le Prisonnier et l'Écrivain, and into Korean. I'm assuming that says The Prisoner and the Writer, but it's pretty amazing to look at. So we have those 3 copies, and then we're going to get started. I'm going to present this a little bit backwards because I think it's important to know about the story of the Dreyfus Affair before we actually get it discussing the publishing process and how it's affecting us today, et cetera, et cetera. So you've heard a little bit about this, but I'm going to start with that. 1894, the French army arrests and tries a French army captain for treason, for offering military secrets to Germany. The army has no proof. It has no evidence, in fact, that it is sharing with the captain and the lawyer during the trial. The captain doesn't understand why he's being blamed, and yet he is convicted. I'm sorry, I'm just going to take a drink of water. I've been talking to students all week and I may have lost my voice a little bit. Thank you. He's convicted and sent 7,000 kilometers away from his home, his family, his children in Paris to French Guiana, to Devil's Island. Devil's Island is one of 3 islands known as Ile de Salut, or Salvation Island. Devil's Island is deserted and it's converted into a jail or prison just for him. And this picture here is where he lived while he was on Devil's Island. I'm getting a little ahead of myself because I want to introduce this man to you. This is Captain Alfred Dreyfus. Before being sent away, he's the only Jewish officer in the French Army's high command. Another important man in this story is Émile Zola. He is a world-famous author, also living in Paris. Some of his best-known books include Nana and Germinal, and he is not a Jewish man. The 2 men have never met. They don't know each other. You know, Dreyfus might know of Émile Zola, considering he's a world-famous author, but they certainly don't know each other. And soon enough, Émile will know a lot about the captain. That's because Émile is told by some friends about the conviction. It's a thrilling story for Émile. That's what he calls it, a thrilling story. Those are his words. But a mistake? How is that possible? How can this whole thing be a mistake? I'm going to read to you a little bit. Whoop. Here we go. At the lowest point of his life, Alfred has nothing left to lose. Guards follow him wherever he goes. They watch him day and night, even when he's chained to his bed, unable to move, unable to sleep. The prisoner can't stop the swarm of mosquitoes feeding on his skin, the insects eating his books, the poisonous spider crabs crawling in through the holes of his hut, the thoughts of death. At the height of his career, Émile has everything to lose. Thoughts haunt him wherever he goes. The more the writer delves into the prisoner's story, the more certain he is of the truth, the facts so plain to see. An innocent man, a wrongful conviction, a biased press. A complete and total injustice. But, and this is the important part for Emile Zola, but if he fights for Alfred's release, the writer can say goodbye to the career he's built, the support of his fans, the life he's created, and quite possibly the life he breathes. So he doesn't make any sudden moves, Emile Zola. Instead, he looks into the story. He looks into Alfred's case. He does a tremendous amount of research. He's an author, he's a writer. This is what authors and writers do. We research and research and research and research and research, as Rona can tell you, going down that rabbit hole, which is an amazing, magical place. But as he's doing this research, he begins to connect the dots to understand what's going on, even though Alfred Dreyfus, 7,000 miles away, still really he doesn't understand what's going on and why he has been put into this position. A new suspect is tried, and the new suspect is found not guilty. Now, here's the thing about this new suspect. His name is Esterhazy, Major Esterhazy, and his handwriting is exactly like the handwriting of the now uncovered evidence. That evidence is called the bordereau. It's one piece of paper that's been torn up into 6 pieces. It was found in the garbage can at the German embassy. Someone took it out. They handed it over to the French army. They pieced it back together. And this was the evidence that they used to convict Alfred Dreyfus and not convict Esterhazy. Esterhazy's handwriting was exactly the same, as I mentioned. Alfred Dreyfus's was slightly the same. But in order to get a match of handwriting samples, they had Alfred Dreyfus writing while he was sitting down. They had him writing while he was standing up. They had him writing when he had a glove on his hand. They had him writing when he didn't have a glove on his hand. They kept trying different ways and different ways and different ways to get his handwriting to match. Okay. Now, I don't know about you, but today this is not police procedure, right? It's like forcing, testimony when there's no testimony to be given. In this case, they're forcing evidence when there's no evidence. There is no match. All right. So the bordereau. Emile is enraged by this not guilty verdict, and this leads him to finally act. Okay. So I'll read this part out loud for you. With news of the military's swift verdict of not guilty, Emile can rage over the realization that Esterhazy's trial was nothing more than an elaborately planned hoax. But he can't engage from the sidelines any longer. Not when he has a voice to speak, a hand to write, the courage to act, the power to persuade. Again, he's a world-renowned author. The writer can't let an innocent man rot away on a faraway island named for the devil himself. And so, what does he do? While sitting at his desk in his Paris home, the world-famous author can pen a letter to the president of France accusing the military of a miscarriage of justice and conspiracy to frame Captain Alfred Dreyfus. A letter that will be published on the front page of L'Aurore newspaper to inform his countrymen that Alfred was blamed, charged, tried, and convicted because he is Jewish. But he can't leave out the confirmed facts and the intuitive truths, the lack of evidence and motive, the secret documents, the forged memos, the cover-ups, the traps, the lies, etc., etc., etc. Now, this letter, as you know, is called J'accuse. Okay. This is a 4,000-word letter to the president of France. It was published in L'Aurore newspaper on January 13th, 1898, so 126 years ago. It remains one of the most famous front page news articles of all time. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit more about its power and how important it remains in history a little later on. The point of this article, though, along with giving all the details that I just mentioned, is that words have power. This is what I like to share with students. When you write something in the newspaper or on social media, whether good or bad, words have power. Okay. Emile Zola stood up and spoke out on behalf of a man, as I mentioned, he never met. And he did it because it was his duty. Those are his words, his duty to do so. He knows he'll be sued for libel for using names in the article or in the letter, and he welcomes it. He welcomes it so much that he actually points out France's libel laws in the letter. Okay. He wants people around the world to be aware of his arrest because maybe, just maybe, people will ask, why in the world is world famous author Emile Zola being arrested? Maybe, just maybe, it will reopen the Dreyfus case. Maybe, just maybe, others will join in the fight to release Alfred Dreyfus. I'm going to put a pause on the storytelling here and let you know, in case you don't know already, that the Dreyfus Affair does not wrap up quickly or quietly or without harm. Okay? It is not all tied up in a pretty little bow now that Emile Zola has joined the fight. This story goes on for a very long time. And it has good points and bad points and good points and bad points. And it will take a long time to actually wrap up this case. Now, bringing it to the future, or the present, I suppose. Today, we're fighting for the release of Israeli hostages. The Prisoner and the Writer was published October 4th, 2022. That is essentially almost 1 year to the date of October 7th. Don't need to mention a year for October 7th. It'll be known without a year for the rest of our lifetimes. Anti-Semitism rises and falls throughout history like a roller coaster. I didn't bring a slide of this, but one of the most interesting things that happened when I was researching the Dreyfus Affair is I went onto Wikipedia. Wikipedia has 4 pages about anti-Semitism. It has from antiquity through the 18th century on one very long scroll of a page. Then it has another page for the 19th century and another page for the 20th century and another page for the 21st century. Considering we're only 24 years into the 21st century, the fact that it has a page already unto itself is a little scary. Okay. So, anti-Semitism is like a roller coaster, but it never disappears. Okay. When the French army sent Alfred Dreyfus to Devil's Island, it believed no one would care about one Jewish Frenchman. It was wrong. When Hamas attacked Israelis and internationals at kibbutzim and at the music festival, I don't know what they believed. I really don't. I don't know what any of the players in this war and all other wars that are happening right now believe. Present, historical, future. I don't know what they believe. I do know that killing people on any side of a conflict doesn't solve anything. I do know there are better ways to resolve conflict. And I know this because I wrote another book that spotlights 15 better ways to resolve conflict. These are imaginative, interesting ways that people got creative and said, what can we do instead of having a fight, like a soccer game, like a painting, a mural, for example. like acrobatic act, like a clown, all right? There are ways to come together before violence happens. There are ways to talk. There are ways to talk. Anyway, back to anti-Semitism's roller coaster. I do know we are climbing to the top of that roller coaster of anti-Semitism if we're not there yet. I'd like to think we're not there yet, but we're there, we're on the way. I do know that the world is split once again, just like during the Dreyfus Affair. I can't speak for all of you watching or listening, so I'm going to speak for myself. I'm confused. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I'm sad. I'm at a loss for words when I look at what is happening around the world. When I visit schools and libraries to talk about the prisoner and writers, I show students the following quote from Alfred Dreyfus. "My only crime is to have been born a Jew." What I do at that point is I find a piece of paper that I have flipped over the wrong way. There we go. And then I ask the students, and I'm going to ask you now here at the JCC, people who are watching online, I'm going to ask you to replace the underlined word, the Jew, with your own word, okay? A word that describes why you may be blamed for something just because of who you are. It might still be Jew. It might be Black. It might be Muslim. It might be differently abled. It might be LGBTQ. It might be a woman. One that gets a laugh from kids is you might be the older sibling, all right? We get blamed for something because of who we are, but something we have no control over. And this goes around the world. It happens around the world. The Prisoner and the Writer is about a Jewish man. But it's also about anyone whose only crime is to have been born something else. And it's about another man, a stranger, who stands up and speaks out because it's the right thing to do. I never really thought about being born as something else when I was a kid. I grew up in a Jewish neighborhood. I went to Jewish elementary school. It wasn't until I went to a non-Jewish high school, which starts in grade 7 in Montreal. So I was about 12 at the time. Montreal is where I was born and raised. And that's when I realized how big the world was. And yes, I was a very naive kid, as I may have mentioned already. Very naive. It was around this time when I was in high school that I saw the film The Life of Emile Zola. Yeah, I used to watch a lot of old movies when I was in in high school, in Cégep, in university. I adore them. And that's when I watched, again, The Life of Emile Zola. And in that movie, of course, you can't have a movie about Emile Zola without the Dreyfus Affair. And that's where I first learned about the Dreyfus Affair. I was a teenager. Let's say I was about 14. Let's say I'm decades older than that now. And yet, that part of the film about the Dreyfus Affair made such an impact on me as a teenager that to this day, it was still in my head. It was stuck in my head for decades upon decades upon decades. Now, anybody who knows me will tell you I have a terrible memory. So that is how much of an impact this movie and the Dreyfus Affair made on me, that I could remember it so long ago. And now, in 2020-ish, when I wrote this book, came out in 2022, I knew I needed to write about the Dreyfus Affair. That's the genesis of the book. It was decades in the making because it was in there and I didn't know what to do with it. As I mentioned before, doing research on a historical topic, on any topic really, involves a lot of research when you're writing. There are a lot of books about the Dreyfus Affair and about Emile Zola. There's even a book written by Captain Dreyfus. It's called 5 Years of My Life, The Diary of Captain Alfred Dreyfus. It's the middle one in there. Okay. Now, I read all of these books. I read more. I like to think that Emile Zola would be proud of how much research I did into this story. But it's amazing. It's quite amazing. I'm just going to put one extra thing in there before I switch the slide. Michael Rosen's book over here, The Disappearance of Emile Zola. You know, when you're a writer, you kind of dream of who's going to blurb your book, right? A blurb is like that little thing in the back or the front that says, this book is fascinating. You should read it, right? You kind of dream of that. And for me, that dream was Michael Rosen, believe it or not. The cool thing is, I got even more than that. Very proud to say, can you tell? Because Michael Rosen ended up reviewing The Prisoner and the Writer for the New York Times. And he had lots of lovely things to say. So my dream, you know, I didn't dream big enough, obviously, because he liked it. He loved it. And he told everyone who reads the New York Times. So that was really a special moment for me. All right. So I read a lot of books to do the research on the Dreyfus Affair. I went down that Google rabbit hole that we were talking about before. It's quite amazing what you can find online these days. You can find articles that did firsthand reporting in the courtrooms of the Zola trial. Okay, that is really cool. You can find interviews with Emile Zola at the time in which the writer, the author, is describing Emile Zola's home. All right, I like these vivid descriptions of his beautiful home. And so that was pretty helpful, probably for Sophie. I don't know if she used those, but it certainly was for me when I was writing the book. I breathed it all in. I breathed it all in. I love doing research. Okay, you can see I love it. If I didn't have to write the book afterward, that would be amazing, but I do. So I can stay down there forever. Now, I didn't have a chance to tour France when I wrote this book. I did have the chance to go to Germany for The Other Side, the novel that you saw before. I did, however, get to stop in Paris for a day because my daughter wanted to go to Paris during our family trip to Germany. And I got to go to the École Militaire with her. We walked over. École Militaire is where, well, it's where the army, the French army is. It is also where the degradation ceremony for Alfred Dreyfus was, when they tore off his stripes and his medals, where they broke his sword in half. That was in this huge parade ground of the École Militaire, and that was quite moving to see when you can sense how many people were there shouting horrible things at him. And to see how big it is, you can imagine what a mob mentality was going on at that École Militaire that day. This image also gives you a horribly descriptive image of how I fact check. You can see all of this scratching and check marks and highlighter. And as a journalist, I've been a journalist for 25 years. I fact check everything like 3 times over. I can't help it. I won't let anything go out without making sure that it is the absolute most factual, I suppose, that it can be for me. I don't want to send out anything that has mistakes. You know, it's possible there are mistakes somewhere along the road in any of my books. Hopefully not, because I fact check every single word, and it actually scares my editor when she sees something like this. But that's my research. Eventually, as I said, you have to come out of that rabbit hole of research to do some writing. My first draft of The Prisoner and the Writer was just a straightforward picture book written in prose, sort of a timeline of the events. But my editor and publisher, Karen Lee, said the topic was better suited to a middle grade audience. I should tell you, she said the same thing about What If Soldiers Fought with Pillows, the other book you saw before. She said that to me many times, and I'm happy to announce that she's finally agreed to keep a picture book that I've given to her as a picture book, and that will be out in 2026. So my first picture book. In terms of the 2 voices, we sat in her office, and because she's brilliant, she saw some parallels between Emile and Alfred in that picture book manuscript. I started listing other similarities that I knew offhand, and there were enough to fill a 64-page book. That's how the story of That's how the story of the two voices came to be. Okay. Each man revealing their impressions, their emotions, two men who, again, had never met, but eerily had very similar stories. Once the story is written, the illustrator comes on board. I know I've shown this picture before, but I want to show you the actual picture this time as opposed to the words. The illustrator comes, and in this case, it was Sophie Casson, who is also from Montreal. She did a lot of research to capture the mood of the Dreyfus Affair and the great many details of the late 18th century. And when you look at this book, you will see the fine details that she's got in there. Her palette is very dark to mimic the goings-on. It's a dark story. She used dark colors, but she also bathes certain scenes in yellow light because she wants readers to know that hope is alive and well. She also learned to do monotypes with oil pastels for this project. This is the first book she's done with this new art method to her. Okay. And it's amazing what you can do because you can only use a monotype once, I learned when I went to her studio. And this is a picture from her studio that I took. So it's incredible. Once you've made one monotype, you use it, you can't use it again. I'm quite often asked why the published version is in verse and no longer in prose. The answer is I don't know. I really don't know. I'll be honest and say I didn't actually know I was writing verse at the time. Like, honestly and truly, I just wrote it the way it was kind of coming out of my head. I wanted to compare and contrast the main characters. I wanted to perhaps compare and contrast what they were thinking, what they knew or what they didn't know. I wanted to imitate Émile Zola's ending to the whole J'accuse article, the 4,000 words. At the very end, you get to the J'accuse part. And I wanted to imitate that in my older version of this story. So maybe in my subconscious, that meant I needed to do something different. I needed it to stick out. I wanted it to have as much of an impact as the story of the Dreyfus Affair did on me when I was 14 years old. And I guess I thought maybe in verse, not that I knew that it was verse at the time, but maybe in this writing, it would stick out a little more. People might be interested in a line here or a line there. But I don't know. I really don't know. Another thing I wanted to do with this book was to pass along some extra information. I've been a journalist for a very long time. I got an education and I got a master's degree in journalism from New York University. And I've trained for a very long time, got an education, and I wanted the back matter of The Prisoner and the Writer to have some information about the power of journalism and the non-power, the dispower, whatever you want to call it, of journalism today. I wanted readers to understand media literacy, essentially. Young readers, I don't know how much they're learning about media literacy today, and it's really information. It's so easy to be misled by misinformation and disinformation and bias and fake news and lies, especially when you don't know that that's what's coming at you. The politically leaning press has not changed since the days of Alfred Dreyfus. The difference, however, is that we knew which newspapers were vehemently anti-Semitic at the time. This is one of them, La Libre Parole. It was totally anti-Semitic. It leaked the story of the Dreyfus conviction before anyone else even knew about it, okay? And he was guilty. Didn't even give him a chance to go to trial. He was just guilty because he was Jewish. I think, and again, this is my own opinion, that today it's much harder to tell who is saying what, and perhaps, even more importantly, why they're saying what they're saying. We have so many various forms of media that we do and can engage with, and that really does scare me for children who don't have media literacy, okay? I've told children this past week when I was doing school visits, you know, do you listen to the first person on TikTok? Is that your news? Do you know who that person is? Do you think that 12-year-old that you're watching has done their research on this big event that they're talking about? Do they have any experience with it? What do they know? What side are they on? There shouldn't be sides. You know, we don't want there to be sides, but let's face it, everyone's going to have a leaning. We all have biases. That's fine. We all have prejudices, whether we think we do or not. But when you're presenting news to other people, you have to share that information. Okay. I wanted readers to know that the Dreyfus Affair remains a modern day story. Okay. This is a statue of Dreyfus. And the interesting thing about this statue is that you can see that his sword is only half a sword. All right. So that is a statue basically to the degradation. Not only is the Dreyfus Affair symbolically a modern day story, okay, but the actual affair itself continued on and on and on. I mentioned earlier, right? It wasn't an open and shut case once Emile Zola came in. It wasn't, great, he's here, he's opened the case, it's all done with now. It didn't work that way. It so didn't work that way that it took 100 years after Alfred landed on Devil's Island for the French army to acknowledge that Captain Alfred Dreyfus was framed. That brings us to 1995. Okay. Who was born in 1995? Not born, but alive in 1995. That would be a very pointed question. Okay. We were alive in 1995. Who of us were here in 1895? I'm going to guess no one. Yeah. Okay. This story was alive in both those times. It continued for that long a period of time. Okay. The Dreyfus Affair is still going on. Okay. It was not settled that whole time. Alfred's tomb and statue were desecrated and defaced with anti-Semitic graffiti in the 1990s and in the 2000s. Okay. Again, this story is more than 125 years old, and things like this are still happening. J'accuse is such an important story. I would personally say in world history, not just French history, that j'accuse is still used today. The word j'accuse is still used today. This is from April 17th, I think, April 17th, 2024. J'accuse is used in the newspaper. Okay. You can still find the word j'accuse in the dictionary. J'accuse, French quotation from Emile Zola, I accuse, a bitter denunciation. You can still find j'accuse on modern day television. Has anyone watched the Netflix series Lupin or Lupin on TV? Yeah. Does anybody recall the name of the dog in Lupin that's been there for three seasons of the series? Do you remember? You know what it is? What's the name of the dog? You don't remember? J'accuse. The name of the dog in Lupin is J'accuse. This show started in 2021 or 2022. That is a very modern use of j'accuse. Okay, it's a bit of a different kind of take on the words j'accuse, but if you know the story, you know that that dog belonged to a journalist who was trying to break a very big story. Okay, this dog is in every episode now. You hear the word j'accuse all the time in the episodes. All right, that is not a coincidence. Okay, that was done on purpose because j'accuse remains important to this day. We are so much more alike than we are different. We are tearing each other down, but we should be holding each other up. We have siloed our issues, but we're stronger together. Emile Zola and all those who worked tirelessly for Alfred's release, and there were many, show us how strong we can be together. When we've done the research, and know the truth. The truth is on the march and nothing will stop it. That is a line in French in J'accuse. Okay. The truth is on the march and nothing will stop it. Once the truth is uncovered, once it is discovered, it is the most powerful information that we have. But it takes a long time for truth to come to the surface because it is so easy to have bias and fake news and lies and unresearched information. I ask students when I talk about the prisoner and the writer about humanity. What is humanity? It means compassionate. It means sympathetic. It means generous behavior or disposition. That is right in the dictionary, Merriam-Webster. That is what it says. These are the qualities humankind are meant to be. And yet some days it's quite hard to believe, I think. We're not necessarily kind to each other, compassionate, sympathetic. We can add any other kind of adjective in there, empathetic, caring. It's hard some days. I hope, and this is my great hope, that books like The Prisoner and the Writer will remind readers that we are all human and that everyone's life is as valuable and as valued as the next. And I would like that no matter what word they use to fill in, my only crime is to have been born something else, that they feel safe being something else. And I'm short, I'm sorry, but that is it. Thank you very much for this, for listening.
Okay. You're not short, you're my height. Oh my. I have goosebumps right now because no, really, that statement is a very, very powerful question, universal to ask. And I really hope that everyone does take the moment to reflect on what that means, and not just for yourself, but for the people in your lives who aren't here to ask that question, or people who may not be able to ask that question. So I think that what I love about these events, these Meet the Author events, is that it's not like one of our regular lectures or one of our regular programs. What we get is a glimpse behind the scenes of what a writer goes through and the process and the genesis for the idea. And so to kick off our question and answer period, I wanted to start, because, you know, I'm a curious sort, with a few questions of my own. And then Denise, thank you so much for hosting our Zoom room. I think that Denise has already got a question here, so we'll get to those. And if anybody here in the room has a question for Heather, this is, you know, our opportunity to ask some questions. Okay, so here is my first. Okay. Because you mentioned the illustrator. Mm-hmm. What was her name?
Sophie Casson.
Okay, Sophie Casson. So here's my question, because obviously in a publication such as this, they are such working in tandem, right? What you've written, mm-hmm. and the illustrations. Did you have any say in who was selected? Was it completely up to the editor or the publisher? And let's say, did they put together a short list where there were a few people, they took a look at your content and they said, aha, we think that these illustrators might be a good pairing for you. And then I guess my last question is, did you have any influence on the way that the illustrations were presented? So you had this in your head for so long. Did you have a visual language or representation in your head when you came to the table? So those are quite a few questions. I'll step back to let you share with us.
Okay, you remember the part where I told you I had a really bad memory?
Uh-oh.
Right? So
no problem.
We're gonna go one at a time.
Sure. You take your time. Take your time.
You're probably gonna have to remember what all those questions are. So, did I have any say in the illustrator? Yes and no. There was a short list that my editor gathered together. She had worked with Sophie before, and she just adores Sophie's work. So she was definitely on the short list. There were a couple of people on the short list. And even though Sophie developed a new style for this book, Karen Lee was quite taken with Sophie for this project. We did look at a few other people and stuff like that. But, you know, as I said, Karen is brilliant. I knew she would do the best for this book. She really wanted this book. And so I knew she would do the best for it. And so I said, yeah, if that's who you want in the end, let's go for it. I trust you. Do I work with Sophie? Was that one of the questions? In tandem with her? No. Usually I would finish or get as close to finished with the writing as possible. And then Sophie would come on board, because then she can look at the words, see how she can interpret them, what she can bring in to the book in terms of that visual language. I do get to see some initial sketches for each page. I'll be honest, it was my first time seeing those initial sketches. I didn't actually know what I was supposed to do with them. When I saw them, I was like, oh, okay, they look good. There were, in the end, when we had the more colored versions, a few things we had to correct, because I didn't know I was allowed to actually have a say in the illustrations, but there were a couple of things we had to correct. That said, Sophie also had something to correct in the words, because I am fluent in French, but it seems I got spider crabs and crab spiders mixed up, because I was actually reading a translated version of Alfred Dreyfus's diary, and I should have read the original. And so in the translation, they got it backwards, and she told me, I think it's supposed to be this way. And so we switched it. She was absolutely right. So there is but it's a back and forth between the publisher and the editor, between Karen Lee. I never really spoke to Sophie at all. I never spoke to Sophie at all. It was kind of a triangle between us. But we did book launch together. That was the first time I met Sophie. We did the book launch in Montreal, and we just hit it off. And so we've been friends ever since. So didn't know each other during the book, but post book launch, we've kept in touch.
That is remarkable. I love hearing this kind of thing. It's like when we have, behind the scenes theater events and you get an idea of what's going on. So I love that. And we actually have a question that is a little bit similar from the Zoom room. Can you do us a favor? Can you just go back to the beginning of your presentation so that we can see like the cover? Is that possible? No? Okay, just so we can see the image with the bars. There. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to read this question on behalf of the Zoom room. I noticed the bars in front of Dreyfus are very dark, while those on Zola's pages are almost invisible. To highlight the invisible threats to Zola, perhaps. Well, I love that question. Let's go over to you.
That was not, I couldn't answer with just that. Yeah, someone knows their history of the Dreyfus Affair. Yes, so this is a bit of I'm going to read it again. But if he fights for Alfred's release, the writer can say goodbye to the career he's built, the support of his fans, the life he's created, and quite possibly the life he breathes. Yes, there was a little bit of future telling in those lines. So you are absolutely, I can't say why Sophie did them in white and why Sophie did them in black. I don't know. I can't answer for her. But you definitely, I love that definition that you gave. Because yes, his life was not safe once he started fighting for Dreyfus. In fact, when you go through other pages, you'll see just how similarly people treated both of them verbally, like the verbal abuse, the physical abuse. the violence that would ensue. Again, I only read you part of the book. There's a lot more to it, even though it's a kid's book and it's only 64 pages. There is a lot more in here to read, and it's not necessarily pretty, right?
Fabulous. Oh, amazing. There is a young lady in the audience who has a question. So what I would ask is if you could please ask it in a nice loud voice, and then Heather, kindly repeat it for our at-home audience. Go ahead. Oh.
So you want me to tell you the end of the story? And let's remember that she's not actually a young lady. She, I believe, put her hand up, so she's about 130 years old, correct? Yeah.
Can you repeat for them?
I'm sorry, the question. Okay. See, short-term memory. Horrible, horrible. She basically wants to know the end of the story. She wants to know if Alfred Dreyfus was ever released from Devil's Island, or if he died there. So I'm going to put it back to you. What do you think happened to Alfred Dreyfus? So the issue of anti-Semitism didn't get resolved until much later. So he probably died there. Do I reveal the answer, or do I make her read the book?
Speaking completely non-nepotistically, because this is my daughter who's asking the question. From you know what am I going to say? What am I going to say? You know what I'm going to say. You're going to read the book and you're going to do the research. But I will just say that for the people again who are with us in the room, shortly after we finish our Q&A, the copies are here and they're available for sale. And for those of you who are at home, and by the way, we have almost 90 people who registered for this program. So we, at the end, Heather, you'll let us know where they can purchase copies. And when we send out the recording, then we'll also include a link for that as well. So excellent question. And what are these events about? They're whetting our appetites, hopefully, to go away and to read the books and to do our own research and to learn more and to carry the conversation on with the other people who weren't fortunate enough to be here with us, right? That's what we hope in the end, so that the message just gets out there and it just keeps going. And then we create our own roller coaster.
Yes.
Right? Then we create a roller coaster of learning and of filling in the omissions and the bias and the gaps.
Yeah.
And my hope always is that through education and through events like this, that's our best way of combating that roller coaster.
Yeah.
Right.
The more you know, and the more you want to know.
Can
I just say one
please,
thing before your question? I just wanted to say that it's not an immediate thing. Everything that happens, is not immediate. There's a lot to it before that question ever gets answered. And yet through it all, I'll just tell you that Alfred Dreyfus has no idea what's going on, because his letters from his wife are being scratched out, right? So any detail that she was sending him, he doesn't know. He doesn't know anything what's going on. He doesn't know that people are fighting for him. He doesn't know that, I don't even know if he knew that Emile Zola joined the fight. I don't think he knows anything, to be honest. I really don't. Again, it's been a while since I've done all that detailed minutia research, but things were being struck out in his letter, so he really didn't know very much of what was. Yeah. Yeah. So the question is, I've done a lot of school talks, and is there a difference between when I present to Jewish schools and when I present to, let's say, public schools, where there might be a mixture of kids? I was just on Canadian Children's Book Week this past week. I spoke to hundreds of kids about two different stories. One was Becoming Bionic, the STEM book, and the other presentation was about War and Peace. So it was about Prisoner and the Writer and What If Soldiers Fought with Pillows. I kind of put them together because they have a nice tie-in with using art to battle what is going on in the world. And I thought that was a lovely message. But to answer your question, it's hard to say. I feel like maybe, and this is really just a big maybe, I feel like when I went to 2 Jewish schools last week, and I feel when I got to the Dreyfus Affair part, there may have been more silence and maybe a bit more of this leaning forward to hear what was going on. I know one boy in one of the schools was really taken by the Dreyfus Affair, that I usually did like a peace mural based on what if soldiers fought with pillows, Guernica and Picasso, that kind of thing. So they all did that. The boy went to the library and checked out The Prisoner and the Writer, and he was reading it right there and then while everybody else was doing the mural. That was pretty cool. I do find maybe in the other schools, which are mixed, I had Jewish kids, non-Jewish kids, whatever. I found they were a bit more interested in what if soldiers fought with pillows, and not that they weren't interested in this story, but that we talked a little bit about video games, we talked about soccer, we talked about the video game guy was from Montreal, and I was in Montreal for the week, so they ate that stuff up because it was something maybe they could it was more tangible to them, right? But they weren't, they didn't set aside the Dreyfus Affair. They still absolutely listened intently. But I do think, and the message is, it's not just a Jewish book, right? I mentioned that before. I'm trying to show people that this is not just a Jewish book. It could happen to any one of us, right? As I said, Black, Muslim, LGBTQ, whatever. We all get blamed for something that we have nothing to do with. But yes, possibly, but it would be slight, because I think people did understand, the humanity of the situation. I didn't talk about the war at all. I wanted to stay away from that. I wanted to talk about the peaceful side and the standing up and speaking out side of both of those stories, because I thought that's the message. These are the kids who need to think differently, who need to present to the world things, different ways of doing things, because the way our politicians do things, it seems to be the same over and over and over, and there's the same thing happens over and over and over. So I came at it from a different message as well. Yeah,
we love the way you came at it. We have a question at the back. I just want to say, for the folks who are in the Zoom room, we're so glad you're joining us for the simulcast. And if you have a question, the best way to communicate that, please, is to type it into the chat. And then Denise will send it to me, or Shay will. If that's not possible and you're not sure how to use the chat, no problem. Feel free to send me an email after the event, and then I'll make sure that your question gets to Heather and that you get a response.
Absolutely.
Does that work?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Absolutely.
fabulous. At the back.
Thank you.
Such an important topic, the Dreyfus Affair. Still today in France, you can find people that still believe that Dreyfus was a traitor. So it's so important to dig into it, write about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a very simple question that triggered my curiosity by speaking.
Okay.
Why on earth 14 years would watch a movie called The Life of
Okay. Can you please?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So, why was 14-year-old me watching the movie The Life of Emile Zola? That's a lovely question. Yeah, my husband's sitting next to you and he's trying not to laugh. Essentially, that movie is the reason you are here today and why this book exists. Absolutely. I don't know. I had friends. I had a brother. I had family. I have cousins. I just loved watching old movies. I really did. Singing in the Rain is my all-time favorite movie. I would just watch you too. Well, you're 130 years old. So, yeah, I just loved watching old movies. I really did. I loved watching old movies. Whether it was Hitchcock or musicals or 1937. I can't remember exactly the date that this came out, but I think it was the 1930s. It was on. I watched it. That was it. There's no rhyme or reason to it. I do a lot of things that have no rhyme or reason to them. That was one of them. That's a very good question, though. Thank you.
Okay. So that is a good question, and it actually dovetails with a question that I had.
Okay.
Okay, so fast forward then, as you mentioned, to 2020.
Yeah.
When you actually put pen to paper. So was it during the pandemic? Was it like, what was it that finally woke up inside of you and said, this is the moment in time where I'm going to take what's been simmering in my head for all of these years, and now is the moment where I need to tell the story? Is that, oh,
Yeah, it's a great question.
okay.
I'm making
Ruminate.
faces at Lisa. Oh goodness. So it would have been a little earlier than 2020 because, in fact, I said I was in Paris and I went to the École Militaire and we were there in 2019. So it would have been, it would have been a little earlier than the pandemic for sure. You know, and I think Rona can back me up on this. Writers have ideas that just pop into their heads all the time, at any time of the day and night, and things that you never thought about before, or things that you've put away for 20 years that have been in your brain just suddenly surge forward, and you pull your cell phone out at 4 o'clock in the morning and type something like "must write about Dreyfus Affair." But it doesn't look like that. It probably looks something like "must urge about this after," right? Like it's that is what all my texts look like at 4 o'clock in the morning. Sorry? Or sit, Rona was saying earlier that stories sit in her computer for 20 years. You know, they just pop out. Things pop out. It could have been something that I may have just seen something about the Dreyfus Affair one day, and I said, "Oh my goodness, yes, I need to write about this." Again, no rhyme or reason to the way I work. I sound like I don't know what I'm doing. But I think as a writer, you just open yourselves up to whatever's going to flow right through you. I have a stack of newspaper articles at home that are just in a folder. I pull them out of the newspaper. It's my husband's newspaper. He's got a lot of holes in his newspaper. I put them in a file folder, and then I go back to them eventually, and I see what I've pulled out. I see what sparks an idea, and it may not even be about that particular thing, but it may be something that sparks something else that has somehow something to do with me. And to be honest, you know, most of those books that are here, most of them have started because it has something to do with me. If I can just, can I just mention them for a second? So Clutch is a love letter to Montreal, which is where I'm born and raised. And the two main characters are loosely based on my dad and my uncle. That's where that came from. The other side is based on my father-in-law and my son. What If Soldiers Fought with Pillows, also based on my son. He was having nightmares about war, tried to get him to go back to sleep. We came up with silly things, right? He was able to fall asleep. I was not able to fall asleep. I had that phone at 4 o'clock in the morning, writing down new what if sentences that can turn into a picture book that Karen Lee would then tell me can't be a picture book. It's got to be middle grade. I can't do what? I would call it then almost a love letter to my grade 11 teacher when I first took law class. He's actually, you know, it's mentioned in the back that it goes back to grade 11 when I learned to have a love of law. So everything pretty much has some sort of something that affected me in some way that I felt I needed to tell the story. I will tell you that my son wants royalties for the other side and What If Soldiers Fought with Pillows because he thinks, you know, I owe it to him. I like to tell him he has food on the table. But that's sort of, they just come, and some are duds and some are not, and some have to do with your life and some do not. So
Wonderful. Love the sharing. Okay, so we have 3 questions that I'm aware of. We've got Edward, we've got Kilia and Erica. Let's see. I think we have time for all 3. Edward, please go ahead. Did you want to come up? Okay, hang on. Can you make a slide? He's going to work his, Edward, do me a favor. Just come and stand. So yeah, come over here. Heather, if you come over. you come over here, then everybody can be seen on Zoom, which is what we want. Nice and loud. Okay. You'll come right into the frame. There we go.
Right.
Thank you.
Heather,
Yes.
thank you so much for this.
Thank
And
you.
really proud that the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards gave you an award for this, especially after hearing you today.
Thank you.
Sitting on our jury is Anna Porter, the celebrated writer and publisher. And she was a champion of your book and a champion of the idea. And the reason why she sits on the jury is she thinks it's important for books like yours to get notice on Jewish themes. Anna Porter is not Jewish. And she was just in Paris just recently, doing some of the same trip that you did, looking at where Emile Zola was, maybe inspired by what you wrote. She wrote a story about it in the National Post yesterday about being in Paris and what's going on right now in the world. And she called me and she's wondering what people who are not Jewish could do about what's going on, how they could react to it. And when you were telling your story about Emile Zola, who's not Jewish, and about your editor and your illustrator, they're not Jewish. And that's my question to you. After this experience, what could people who are not Jewish do to address some of the things that are going on?
That's a really good story, a really good question. I wish Anna would have taken me with her. It would have been a really cool trip. By the way, and just if you are in touch with Anna, I don't know if she's back or not, there is actually now a Dreyfus Museum that opened up in 2020 or 2021. Give me 1 second. It opened up, and the cool thing about it is it actually opened up in 2021, I think. Yeah, 2021. The Alfred Dreyfus Museum is in Emile Zola's cottage in Médan, the little town of Médan outside of Paris. What a wonderful partnership and what a wonderful way to promote them both. You know, what's going on today is scary. But I want to say that I have a friend and colleague who to me, and I'm not going to name him, but to me, he has been, for me, the modern day Emile Zola, because I know him. He's not making things world renowned, but he is posting on Facebook all the time. He's not a Jewish person, but he is posting things, trying to separate the lies from the truth, trying to explain where things are stemming from, where they're coming from, trying to educate people from the research that he's been doing and putting it forward. And when people are saying, what are you talking about? He explains it some more, and he explains it some more, and he explains it some more. And many a time I've written to him, you know, on the side. I don't write under, you know, where it's public, but I just say thank you, you know. Thank you for putting forth what you believe and the truth as I see it. Somebody else on who has a different opinion are saying that he's lying. That's what we do, right? He's written for the newspaper. He's written on Facebook. I think the thing that people can do is to, whatever your specialty is or whatever, if you have a voice that you can speak with, then speak. If you have a way to write about what your concerns, then write. You know, I mentioned Picasso before. If you're a master painter and you want to show the world what's going on through a painting, go ahead and do it. But I think the most important thing that anybody can do is to speak up and keep repeating the truths. Do the research and repeat the truths until people understand the truth of what is going on. It's so hard because media, and I speak as a journalist, but media has gone bonkers. And that's sad for me because that's what I do. But you know, the truth is out there, you know, As Emile Zola says, the truth is on the march. We just have to put it out there. And I think anybody can do that, no matter who you are.
Yeah.
Oh,
Here, here.
thank you.
I agree. Absolutely. Okay. We have time, I think, for 2 more questions. Okay. The young lady. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice and loud. Yeah.
That one? Okay. Mhm.
Can you
That's really
can you
good. Yeah.
repeat?
So the question is, the 3 different covers look a little different. One of the hands are closer, the bars are darker, the bars look further. They're all slightly different. You're right. And in the last one, actually, I think it looks like it was extended even more along the bottom of that one on the Korean one. You know what? I should have brought the copy of the French one and the Korean one. I didn't bring them. They're actually all different sizes. Yeah, the French one is, I think it's squarer. The Korean one, I pulled it out, but I can't remember exactly what size it is, but they're all different sizes. They fit the format of whatever that publishing house does, what they felt was better for their readers. So I think they just stretched, like we all do with, Photoshop. They just played with it a little bit. I don't think there's any meaning to it except for the way they needed to size it for their cover. But that's a really good noticing.
That's a great question. I
Yeah.
love that. Now you've got me curious. I wonder, has it been published in Hebrew?
Not that I know of.
Huh. Yiddish.
Not in Yiddish either. No. Not that I know of.
Very nice. Okay. I think we have time for one final question.
Sorry. Wondering if you can talk a bit about the complexity of writing for young people about something more than a century ago, and especially your ability to convey the facts of the case as well as sort of the feelings of the players, so that you really are brought into the minds and emotions of Zola and Dreyfus.
Mhm.
Just the difficulty of dealing with the piece of history that's so far back.
Yeah, sorry. The question is, how did I deal with bringing such a complex story to children? How was I able to go through sort of the legalese and the emotions and just the language level to bring it to children, to middle grade? A very good question. I like to say that I read like a 12-year-old. And that's not a disparaging thing. I like when things start right away. I don't like when things are flowery and take me forever to get into a book. Like you might, and you get that in YA as well, in middle grade as well, but I don't want that. I want impact. I want it right away. So that for me is sort of how I start things. That's why he's behind bars. He's on Devil's Island, for example, when the book starts. We're right into the story. He's right there. Why is he there? The complexity of it, absolutely. There is so much to this story. And because there's so much to the story, and I really narrowed it down to 2 people, and it did not involve just 2 people. His brother was involved. Athol Dreyfus's brother was involved. His wife was involved. Colonel Picard, who's the first person who discovered that something funny was going on within the army, is involved. There are a lot of players, but when you're dealing with a certain age group, you can't bring all those players in. You have to limit it. These were the 2 main players that I wanted to express. And so I had to deal sort of with that, write down the notes about them. But then there's an author's note in the back, which is quite long, because I did mention more of the players back here so that people can understand that it's not just these 2 men. And then you have really great editors who for me, I try to do a first pass that has the content. All right. In anything I write, I need to get the content down, and it might sound a little older, but then I start bringing it down, or with the help of my editor, we bring it down. That's how that kind of works. And in terms of, the legalese or the jargonese, to be honest, if I don't understand it, I'm not going to, give it to 12-year-olds to understand. Is it essential to the story? Maybe. If it is, I'll definitely try to pare it down to what it is. If it's not, I'm not going to include it. So it is pick, give and take, pick and choose. And then just hope that what you've got in there is the best that it can be. Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, I think you've given us the best
Thank
of
you.
what it could be, and how wonderful that you took time out of your very busy schedule to be with us today. So on behalf of everybody who's here in the building with us, everybody who's live on Zoom, and the many people who are going to be watching the recording, we're really grateful to you, Heather, for bringing us The Prisoner and the Writer and the story behind it. Please
you.
join me in a well-deserved round of applause for Heather Camlot. So I'm going to ask Heather to have a seat for a minute while I do my closing remarks. And momentarily, for those of you who are in the room, you'll have a chance to purchase the book. And Heather, where can we purchase it online?
You can purchase it online. Hello. You can purchase it online at your local indie bookstore, for example, Mabel's Fables here in Toronto. Babar Books in Montreal, if you're coming from over there, they actually have signed copies because I was just there last week. And they will deliver anywhere, but go to your local indie and of course, anywhere that you buy books.
Wonderful. Amazing. So I just wanted to mention that we've been offering a series of Meet the Author events throughout the year in partnership with the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards. And our final event for this season is next month. So it's on Sunday, June the 9th, right here in this room, but also multi-access. Award-winning playwright and journalist Michael Posner will be with us, revealing untold stories about Leonard Cohen. That is his 3-volume biography. And he is going to be revealing many of the interviews that he conducted and never before heard stories. Really, I think that for anyone who's a Leonard Cohen fan, you don't want to miss that one. And for some of our other spring programs that we have coming, this Thursday in our Al Green Theater, we have a free film screening of the award-winning documentary, The Wild One, about celebrated Broadway director, Actors Studio West co-founder, controversial filmmaker, and Holocaust survivor, Jack Garthane. That is presented in partnership with Toronto Public Library as part of its Jewish Heritage Series, and it is also being held in commemoration of Yom HaShoah. Architectural historian Marta O'Brien is returning to our building for the first time since the pandemic with a series beginning Monday, June the 3rd, exploring Toronto's West End. She'll be looking at Parkdale, Wellington Place, and the Junction. And again, you can join us either in person on Zoom or register to receive the recording. And popular folk singing duo Sue and Dwight are also back in our building for the first time in 4 years on Thursday, June the 6th, with their 60s folk tribute concert, Give Peace a Chance, because of course, that theme is uppermost on our minds these days. So, as always, it was my absolute pleasure spending time with you this afternoon. For those of you who are in the room with us, please do stay. And in a moment, Heather will be over there signing and autographing her book. For those of you who are on Zoom, you can please watch for information about these events in our e-newsletters. You are always welcome to email me, lisa.r@mnjcc.org. And I look forward to seeing you again soon, either in person or virtually at the Miles Nadal JCC. Have a great day.